Welcome back to Season 2, Episode 1 of the TURD Podcast, also known as the Trail Ultrarunning Race Directors Podcast. I'm your host, Shalini Bhajjan, and I'm super excited to welcome Jeff Mallach, the race director for Ice Age, one of the oldest and iconic races in the Midwest, on the Ice Age National Scenic Trail that expands over 1,000 miles and is about 12,000 years old. So let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast, Jeff.
Thanks, Shalini.
Um, let's talk about who is Jeff Mallach.
Born in Wisconsin. Lived most of my life here. Went to school at University of Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. Was never much of a runner until my early 20s or mid 20s actually,
Sure.
and ran for 30 years. And so here I am. I'm married, have one daughter. She lives in Nashville, have three grandchildren, and I, for a career, am a marketing and fundraising consultant for nonprofit organizations.
Okay. And has that always been your career path, going from school into where you currently are?
Yeah, I my first job, professional job out of school was as the development director for a small nonprofit out of Madison, Wisconsin, and then moved over to the agency side and have been working there for several years. Let's put it that way. So I've worked with a number of mostly large national nonprofits trying to build their membership bases and generate funds to support their program work.
Sure. And you had mentioned you're born and brought up in Wisconsin. Is that correct?
Right.
And met your wife there, spent majority of your lifetime, I guess, in Wisconsin. Like, what general area are you located in?
Southeast Wisconsin,
Okay.
between Milwaukee and Madison.
Gotcha.
I live about 45 minutes north of the Ice Age Trail
Very
course.
nice. Yeah. Um, so let's talk about just briefly your first brush with running. And I know you've had a pretty solid career as far as racing goes. What was that like, the transition into racing, and what was the drive?
Yeah, uh, my first bump into running was as I shared with you, I think earlier, on a track in junior high school,
Yeah,
where the gym teacher basically put us on the track and told us to run the 600 at the time as fast as we could.
sure.
So no one on that track, except for the guys who were interested and the women who were interested in track, had any experience or knowledge. So everybody just ran as fast as they could. After doing this a few years, I realized that the sort of the best strategy for that dreaded day on the track was just to stay on the inside lane and not get vomited on before you finished, because there was plenty of that going on.
Sure.
So I didn't really leave Phi Ed with a real good feeling about running.
Gotcha.
Um, I went to school, graduated. My brother-in-law invited me out to Pikes Peak to hike up the mountain, and I decided I had to get in some kind of shape. So I started walking on a trail behind my apartment at the time, and got bored with it. So I decided one day I was going to go to the running store, buy a pair of shoes, and start running. And kind of drawing from everything I knew about running, I ran as fast as I could for the first half a mile, and then was
Right.
bent over on the side of the trail and realized there must be a better way to do it. So I went to the library, I picked up a bunch of books on running, I subscribed to magazines, and just started the process of sort of learning how to run and prepare for a hike up Pikes Peak. I
Yeah.
came back from the Pikes Peak experience sort of energized to sort of take on running in a totally different form. And, like a lot of folks, just started running 5Ks, 5 mile races, 10K races on the roads.
Sure.
And it just sort of, then I began starting running marathons at the suggestion of a friend of mine who was a competitive marathoner at the time.
What year was that? Do you remember?
Huh.
And how old were you?
I think the Pikes Peak experience, I think I was about 26 or 27.
Yeah,
And then my first marathon, I think, was when I was 30 years old.
sure,
And yeah, and then ran probably, I don't know, 15, 16 marathons. And then, trail running at that time was sort of, there was an established group of ultra runners, trail runners in the area. And Wisconsin actually had a fairly high number relative to, I think, a lot of other states at the time.
sure.
Um, so kind of got involved in that community and decided to take on Ice Age as my first, well, actually my second ultra. I ran a 50K to prepare for that one.
Gotcha. As you had mentioned, Wisconsin has a pretty, and I would agree with that statement that there is a lot of community, different groups that are very encouraging. And I actually got my start with the Coyotes out that way. Back in the day, and I'm kind of just, looking at your quick bio. Would you name some of the groups that you kind of got introduced into trail running and ultra running with?
Yeah, I ran by myself for years. I didn't even know that there were trail running groups in the area.
Yeah,
And then kind of bumped into an old high school friend who had run Ice Age. And he suggested that we start running together. So I joined up with like two or three of his friends, and we just started running out at Lapham Peak State Park, which is near Delafield, Wisconsin. It's a very hilly 7 mile, fairly challenging course. Um, and when you start running, you sort of branch out. We started running other trails. There was a group, um, I think they called themselves the Trail People. They were the Saturday morning group that ran at Scuppernong Park, which is
yeah,
part of the Kettle 100
hmm,
mile
yeah,
course. And they'd been running there for years. These were the guys and women who were really what I would regard as, at least in my life, the pioneers of ultra running. When it was a very small community, but there were some notable names in that local group of runners. And several that ran on the US 100K team, Tom Bunk and Lorraine Bunk, who were sort of royalty in the Wisconsin sort of Midwest ultra running community, and a lot of sort of recognizable faces from the 70s and 80s in ultra running.
sure,
Many became good friends. Um, so um, there was a sort of a marriage of the two groups, and folks from the trail people would hang out with us at Lapham, and vice versa. So there were numerous opportunities every week to go out and run with different people and
sure,
learn. That's really where I did most of my learning, is on
yeah,
the trail with veterans.
yeah. So I was just kind of stalking you on Ultra Sign Up and looking at some of your history, and it looks like was, if I'm correct, 2000 was where I see the first official results posted up until 2013. Does it sound about right?
For me personally,
Yeah.
yeah, I started my first ultra was in
Okay. Okay.
1997 or 8, somewhere in there.
Yeah. And then as I'm looking through, the 2013 was Marquette 50K was is that the last race you
I
ran?
can't, I can't remember. It was somewhere in there.
Yeah.
There were some really low key Wisconsin races that might not show up on ultra running.
Sure, sure, sure. Again, with so much history and back in the day when you were racing and running, and having that up until this point, what was your sort of full stop, or are you still running? I know you're race directing, so you're very involved with the ultra running community and just the running community in general. I would love to know. what that transition was for racing, and then, why and when did you stop?
Yeah. Well, the transition from marathoning into ultra running, just quickly was, I'd done the Madison Marathon, um, back in the 2000s, and ran a PR, and felt good afterwards, and actually thought I could run a little bit more. So that's really when I sort of I was very close to breaking 3 hours in the marathon, but I kind of lost interest in that distance and sort of looked into trail running, and as they say, did never look back. So then um, that's how I got into ultra running, and ran my first 50K was the Glacial Trail 50K, which just happened last weekend up in
Yeah,
the northern Kettle Moraine, which is a wonderful low-key race. I mean, really, if you're looking for an experience of what ultra running was like 20,
yeah,
30
yeah,
years
yeah,
ago, that's a good one. Very challenging trail, at least by Wisconsin standards. Um, and ran until 1999, and then tore my meniscus, and then went to a doctor who was recommended by other runners, who said that he would get me back on my feet. And after the surgery, though, he told me not to run any longer,
yeah,
um, and suggested biking or swimming. Well, I biked for a little while, but I really couldn't. I couldn't get into that as much as running. So after a period of time, I started walking mostly on the trails. And my goal at that point, because he was very adamant about not running any longer, was to complete a 6 mile out and back on the Ice Age Trail that's right behind my house.
yeah,
And I thought that was a fair goal to have, but I kept doing it, and then morphed into running, or more jogging and then running, and after the point that the doctor said I shouldn't run anymore, I probably finished 60 or 70 ultras.
very nice.
So I guess the lesson there is, you'll listen to your doctor,
Sure.
but maybe with one ear, you
Yeah,
know. I was very careful. He said, I asked him how I would know if it was damaging myself. He said, there'd be redness and soreness in the knee, and I never had that.
yeah,
But then I slipped on some steps in probably mid 2000s, and retore the same meniscus. So that sort of sidelined my ultra running. So I still
gotcha.
hike a lot, but
Yeah.
I'm running competitively anymore.
Okay. And again, just kind of reviewing your bio of several 50Ks, several 50 milers, and you have a handful of 100 milers that you ran. What was that experience like? Do you have a favorite distance over over the course when you were actually actively racing?
Yeah, I'd say 50 mile was my favorite distance. I mean, I did a lot of 50Ks, mostly as sort of trainers or prep for 50 miles. 50 mile races. I think I had 300 mile finishes, two at Kettle and one out at Cascade Crest,
Yeah,
and had two starts that I didn't finish. One that ended up as 100K at Kettle, and then I ran the first ever 100 mile race out in Montana,
yeah,
which was an incredible experience, but didn't I didn't end up at the finish line. So.
yeah. So I'm going to go back to Cascade Crest, and primarily because I'm just curious. I ran Cascade last year. Um, I'm just curious, what was the race like back when you ran it?
Oh, it was wonderful. It
Yeah,
was it was beautiful. I'm not sure how the course has changed since that time. I don't think it probably has. It was just so the terrain was so varied.
yeah,
Is extremely challenging. But it really it was I remember, if I recall correctly, it started at like 10:30 in the morning, and
yeah,
we had
yeah, yeah,
breakfast before the race, which was unusual from that perspective. Um, I had a great time out there. I would highly recommend that race
yeah.
to anyone who's considering sort of a mountain 100 miler. What did you say you've done it before?
Yeah, I ran it last year. So the course, it was the original course, which is a 100 mile loop. And the race still starts at like if I'm remembering right, it was like 9:30 um was when the race started. And
At a
yeah,
fire station, right? Was
yes.
right.
And that's where the loop ends and finishes. So yeah, so you ran the original layout as well. Um, but yeah, I mean it absolutely, I would echo your words. It's a gorgeous course and one of the oldest standing ultras, 100 miles. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. So let's dive into Ice Age. You have a history of Ice Age. You've run the course. What year was it? And how did you come on board as the race director? And actually, even before you dive into that, I would love for you to fill me in, and anybody that's listening on the history of the race. It's what, 43 years. It's one of the oldest ultras out there. So just touch on that for me and then dive into how you got into race directing Ice Age.
Okay. Um, Ice Age is one of the longest running 50 milers in the country.
Yeah,
I think there are three or four, obviously JFK, but I think there are two or three after JFK that are still running.
sure.
Um, Ice Age was the first 50-mile trail race in the Midwest.
Hmm.
It was founded by Tom Ulick, who was a well-known and very accomplished ultra runner, and Glenn Wargalit, who was the race director prior to me taking on the role. Glenn, I should just say here, was the race director for 5 years uh, prior to my involvement, and stayed involved in the race up until just a few years ago.
Gotcha.
Um, and that really was reassuring to me, but also sort of speaks to the nature of the race and the people that are involved at the organizational level. I mean, as a co-founder of the race, a race director, and then certainly support for me. It really kind of there are a lot of people invested in the success of this race because it means something to them.
Sure.
And in addition to Glenn, two other race directors, the second race director, Don Ayer, also remains involved in the race today. He was a race director in the mid 80s. And John Zinzo and his wife live right off the Ice Age course. They are also sort of available to me and always have advice about, how to organize uh, and answer any issues that might come up that I would have. So I mean, there's, as I said, there's a real strong sort of connection with everybody who's been involved in the race in
Sure.
some way or the other. So I mean, I was running a lot of races. I suppose not many compared to a lot of folks, but I'd say 7 or 8 ultras a year at the time, and had the good fortune to run with Tom Bunk. I couldn't really stay with him until he was about 70 years old. I mean,
Yes.
the man was incredible, and
Yeah.
his wife Lorraine, similarly, just wonderful people, and Tom still holds three Ice Age course records,
Yeah.
and his wife Lorraine holds four. Um,
Nice.
and Lorraine was the only woman over 70 to finish the race, and that was back probably about 10 years ago.
Very
So
nice.
those records are pretty stout. And
Sure,
if you go
sure.
onto the Ice Age website and look at the course records for the age division records, it's really remarkable.
Yeah,
You know, uh, and folks come up every single year with the sole intention of beating those records, and sometimes they do, but most often not. And so I would invite anybody who's competitive to come up and try to crack one of those because they're tough. Um, so anyway, I was out there running a bit and was running with Tom and got to know him, and he was the one who asked me if I would be interested in running or directing Ice Age. He was involved in the Bachelor Striders, which was the sponsoring organization
sure.
um, of Ice Age and knew Glenn, and Glenn was looking to sort of retire from the RD position. So Tom asked me if I would, and I didn't really think it through. I was just so flattered that he asked me
Yeah.
to take on that responsibility. I said yes, and then he said great. He talked to Glenn Wargalet. I went over to Glenn's house. Glenn was the former chief financial officer at Master Lock company here
Yeah.
in Milwaukee. And I say that because I was overwhelmed after our first meeting because he had folders and boxes of files about everything related to race organization and the history of the race.
Yeah.
And so we spent a night um, having a few beers and going through those boxes. And I left excited, but also sort of paralyzed by the by the level of responsibility.
Right. So
So,
let's quickly talk about the year Ice Age was founded.
mhm,
And what year was it that you took over? I know you've been race directing for what, 15 years, Ice Age now?
right.
So just quick reference on the year Ice Age was founded, and then when you came, what year was it that you?
Yeah. Ice Age was the first Ice Age 50 was in 1982.
Okay.
Um, and the story is on the website, but it's a funny one. Again, through the Striders, Glenn and Tom Ulick were having a beer after a Striders meeting, and Tom, who was a Western States finisher, very competitive Midwest runner at the time, thought that it was time for Wisconsin to host a 50-mile race, and Glenn said, well, he knew of a park in Milwaukee County that would be great because you could control the course. It was a 1 mile loop. And Tom said, oh, that's not exactly what I had in mind.
Right.
So he took Glenn out to the Southern Counter Moraine for a trail run, and the rest, as they say, is history. Glenn was
Yeah,
just overwhelmed by sort of the challenge and the beauty of the area, and they decided together to sort of organize organize the race.
sure.
So that was the first year. There were 99 starters
Yeah,
and 75 finishers. Um, Tom Ulick, I should also say, was a former race director, was very involved, at least in available to me and throughout my early years as a race director, and a wonderful man who lived in retired in Phoenix, but had some wonderful stories about the early days of ultra running. I think everybody sort of knew everybody, and there was, ultra running magazine started basically the same time as Ice Age did.
yeah,
So there was that resource, but mostly races were promoted by word of mouth.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
you'd call each other and say, "Have you heard about this race over here?" And that's how the whole community and ultra running scene sort of developed back then.
Sure. With Ice Age, it started as a 50 mile, but currently there is a 50K and I believe a half marathon distance option as well. When was that introduced? Was that within your time of covering the race, or was that prior? And what was the reason for adding outside of just introducing more people onto the trails?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, the 50K was introduced, I think, in 2000, year
Okay.
2000, by um, John and Holly Zinzo. I'm not sure what their motivations were, but they set up a separate 50K course, so the 50 mile and the 50K would sort of be running simultaneously. There was also a 50K relay that I sort of inherited, but that only lasted about a year after I took over, and we replaced it with a half marathon. Again, at Tom Bunk's suggestion. Tom at the time said, these half marathons seem to be a thing. And
Yeah,
at the time, there were only, I think, 4 half marathons in the entire state of Wisconsin. So
sure.
obviously it's kind of grown since then. But the goal of the half marathon was really to introduce people to trail running. And at the time, trail running was just starting to sort of gain some traction and attention. Road running was still sort of where the scene was at, but the books were published, Ultra Marathon Man and 9 years later, Born to Run, and
Sure.
suddenly people were really looking for a different experience. I was a little bit concerned, drawing in a lot of road runners into the race. I wasn't sure how they'd receive it, and I anticipated a lot of complaints about the hills or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
But I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, really, I think that it succeeded, at least in the early years, in introducing folks to ultra running, and I heard from so many people who are complimentary, just about the opportunity to sort of see folks who were running longer distances and sort of inspire them to consider that for themselves. And a lot of folks who finished the half marathon maybe took a year or two or three, but they ultimately decided to take on the 50K or the 50 miler, and that's a great part of the story.
Sure. Um, let's talk a little bit about the course layout. Has the course modified since its inception? And give me a little snippet of how it's laid out, out and back. I ran Ice Age 50 mile in 2016. That was kind of my training run into Western States. But um, so give me a little snippet of that, and then I would love to, Ice Age Trail itself. It's 1,000 miles, and I know there's certain features that are very iconic, and because of the glacial formation. So, give me a little bit more about that and what makes the course unique.
Okay. Well, in terms of the Ice Age Trail itself, well, let me speak a little bit about the Ice Age Trail 50 course. Has changed over the years, but not substantially. The
Okay,
start the start area has always been in the Nordic area of which is outside of the tiny town of LaGrange, Wisconsin.
sure.
Um, when I ran my first Ice Age, it started on the road, and then we'd run about a half a mile and then drop onto the trails. Now it starts on the trails. Probably when you ran it in 2016, starts right at the trailhead. Um, there it's difficult to describe the course. It's oversimplification. It's sort of a loop and two out and backs.
Yeah,
So you do a 9 mile loop on sort of rolling, wide open kind of terrain. At least it's a wide path through treed areas, evergreen forests, and there are some tough hills in that first 9 mile loop. And then you go southbound to Whitewater Lake on the Ice Age Trail, and then turn around there, come back to about the area of the Nordic Loop, and then go northbound to what's the Emma Carlin
yeah,
trailhead, turn around there, and then run into the finish. At the Emma Carlin, you're about 40 miles into the race.
sure.
The 50K does an out and back initially to the horse riders aid station, back for that 13 mile out and back to start the race, then two of the Nordic loops at 9 miles each. The half marathon are two 6.5 mile loops. All races start in the same place. The half marathon course does not extend to the Ice Age Trail. Um, Most of the 50 mile races on the Ice Age Trail, roughly 10 miles of the 50K course is on the Ice Age Trail, but all of the trails sort of intersect at some point.
Sure.
So that's that course. Um, the Ice Age Trail in Wisconsin is a National Scenic Trail, and it's difficult to describe too. Sort of think of it as like a cursive V that starts in northwest Wisconsin, drops all the way down to the southern Kettle Moraine, um, and then sort of loops back up to Door County, which is the little finger of Wisconsin that sticks into Lake Michigan. Um, and uh, there's a number of races in the area that include a component of the Ice Age Trail, but uh, it is attracting more and more attention as it
Sure.
received national park status. I think last year or the year before. So
Yeah,
there
yeah,
are a
yeah.
lot of folks who are doing through hikes now
Sure.
on the trail.
Okay. So with Ice Age kind of, where it is today, um, talk to me a bit about the transition. I'm sure over the 15 years you have seen so much. And then dive into course records because some of the course records, as you had mentioned, have been long-standing, like very long-standing, and are very stout as in terms of like pace and stuff. Um, so give me a little bit of that, brief into that.
Yeah, uh, the the course record was set by Max King in 2014. He
Yeah.
ran a 5:41 '07. The women's record was set the same year by Casey Lichtig.
Hmm.
And she ran a 6:41 39. What was special about that year is that in 40 almost 44 years of history and thousands of runners
Yeah.
who've done the 50 miler, only nine have finished under 6 hours.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and four of those were in 2014.
Yeah.
And that was really one of the more exciting years of the race because at the time, Montrail, with Shoe Company,
Sure,
was
sure.
still sponsoring the Ultra Cup Championship.
Yeah.
And so what that meant was Ice Age was the last event in the series. And and a lot of runners who were, elite at the elite level, who had either scheduling conflicts or issues with the races that they were planning to use to qualify for Western states.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, it didn't work out, so they came to Ice Age because it was their last chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
first and second place winners, male and female, received automatic entries into the Western states.
Gotcha.
So, so Max came and we also had a local runner who showed up and hung with the cheetahs, so to speak. And four guys finished under 6 hours, and
Yeah.
it was a very exciting time. But going back a little farther in the history of the race, Andy Jones from Canada held the 50-mile course record for 26 years prior to
Wow.
Max coming in.
Yeah.
Um, and Andy, if you look back through the archives and you're interested in sort of ultra running history, you'll see that he was a remarkable Canadian runner, ran across the country, had a number of world records at a variety of differences. I think he had the 100-mile and 100K records, world records for some time, and he had the course record for 26 years.
Yeah.
So when we heard that Max was running at a pace faster than Andy, it was a fairly incredible moment in history as we were getting reports from the course that he was above Andy's pace. And so when he did finish, it really was a wonderful moment
Sure.
um, in the history of the race. And Casey's finish also was remarkable in that she shaved quite a bit of time off the women's record. Um, so yeah, that was a great year. Um, in terms of other, I mean, we've had I think one of the great things about Ice Age that I really appreciate and respect is not only the sort of the fast runners who come in and compete, but the folks who keep coming back to
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
race.
Yeah.
And there was a gentleman, I think it was a professor of math at the University of Wisconsin, who has had 8 wins at Ice Age. And Donna Perkins, who is a local firefighter, had 4 4 wins. They still
Yep.
have the most overall wins specific gender by gender in the history of the race. Sydney Noble, I want to call him out. Sydney came up from Kansas with the intent of winning the race the most consecutive times several
Yeah.
years ago, and he did it. He
Yeah.
won 4 years in a row,
Sure.
and still, I think he still comes back to the race. And so, we had three individuals who have finished the race more than 30 times.
Wow.
We have 5 people who have finished 25 times. We have 30 people who have finished 20 times, and I think like 160 or 170 runners who have come to Ice Age and finished more than 10 times.
That's incredible. Yeah.
So
Um,
you see a lot of familiar faces.
yeah. And I remember that, and we'll dive into the community aspect of it a little bit, but has the race always been in May?
Yeah, that's a good question. It might have been in June 1 or 2 years way back when in the
Okay.
80s, but otherwise, yeah, it's been the second Saturday in May.
Okay. And I know May, like living in the Midwest, it's a touch and go, it can get really extremely hot, it can get cold. Have you had any years where you've seen those extreme um, fluctuations in temperatures and weather over the course that you've been race directing?
Um, It was a lot worse before I was a race director. Tell you the truth. I mean, there are many runners who would say stop lying because
Yeah.
there have been some years and since COVID, interestingly, where it's been incredibly hot.
Yeah.
Um, our first step back in, we canceled the race during COVID and then delayed it the second year until September, which was a bad move on my part. It was almost 90 degrees,
Oh,
and we've
wow.
had 2 other races since then where it's been in the upper 70s.
Sure.
Um, but there are plenty of stories from the folks who ran the race, prior to 2010, when who talked about snow. There's been snow, there's been rain and temps in the 30s.
Yeah.
Very sort of challenging weather. But in general, the last 15 years, outside of those 3 really hot years, it's been really, really
Manageable.
nice for running.
Yeah. Um, would you uh would you say the Ice Age course is intermediate or beginner friendly? How would you like given current standards of racing, how would you kind of categorize if you were to put it in a box?
I'd say it's moderate. Um, there are a lot of hills,
Yeah.
and I don't know that anybody has ever officially counted them. Somebody told me once after a race that they did count them.
Yeah.
This is hearsay, but the number that he provided was 75,
Okay.
and we'll see. But the hills, I think most people would agree are many people have described them as relentless.
Oh yeah, it's
And
all up and down. Yeah.
yeah, and I always said you can run every hill, but you can't run every hill.
Yeah.
You look
Yeah.
at the hill and you think, oh, I can do that, and then you run
Sure.
it, and then the next one comes and you run it and you run it, and at a certain point you can't run them anymore. I remember there was one runner years ago who was from Montana. I think he lived in Missoula, Montana. He was a mountain runner,
Yeah.
and I'm sure he thought that he could come out to Ice Age and just set the course record.
Sure.
And he finished second. And I remember though he came up to me after the race and he said that was the hardest race I've ever run.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that surprises me. And he said, because I tried to run every hill.
Yeah.
And he said in the mountains, you can work your way up and then run down. But there's sort of a finite up and down
Yeah.
versus just continuous hills. That said, the trails are not very technical. There's one
Sure.
section south of Highway 12 where it's rocky and rooty, and twists around a lot, but most of the course is very manageable.
Okay. I'm going to go back into the structure of Ice Age. You had mentioned the Badger Striders. So are they sort of the governing body? How is it sort of structured? Is there an executive board, like decision making, and what's your role in it?
The Striders, I believe, have been a running organization since the early 1970s.
Yeah,
They're a nonprofit running club based in Milwaukee. Um, they were formed at roughly the time of the first running boom. They currently oversee and organize 16, I think 16 races.
sure.
Four of them are trail races, and the rest are road races,
Okay,
including the Lakefront Marathon, which has been around for a long time, which is a marathon that runs in the city of Milwaukee. Um, they do have an executive board. They have vice presidents that are based on sort of the distance of the races. So they have a VP of short distance, VP of
sure,
middle distance, and then VP of long distance. And so I, am involved, but they largely provide a lot of support and equipment and volunteers
sure.
for the race. Um, without the support of that organization, it'd be difficult to sort of stage Ice Age, at least in the way that folks are accustomed to.
Sure, sure. So as far as permits and just, some of the groundwork that race directors have to do, is that solely on you? Are you getting 5-year permits because it's a national forest, or just touch on that a little bit for me?
Yeah, I'd like to hear something about that from you as well, because I mean, it's been fairly easy for me from a
Yeah,
permitting standpoint. I know a lot of race directors bump into serious sort of issues
sure.
with permitting. Um, the Ice Age starts in a state park. So I work with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. They've been very cooperative and supportive of the race. So the permitting process is fairly simple.
Gotcha.
Um, our big issue is parking
Uh,
because it is sort of out there. There aren't any large towns or cities nearby. We are limited by parking. So we spend most of our time with the DNR just talking about parking alternatives, and oftentimes that involves sort of approaching neighbors or businesses in the area. We have sort of found a home at the local high school
sure.
who allows us to park there, but the permitting process is not an obstacle for the race. I
Okay.
mean, maybe this isn't appropriate, but tell me about your tell me about your experience with
So,
permitting.
again, I will pretty much echo, majority of my events are on state parks, DNR. I'm working with MDC, county parks. So permits have not been a huge issue. It's annually renewed for us. There have been times when, there's a trail closure and then trying to like navigate some of that, but I think that just all is part of the territory, and it's, you just modify the course or figure out an alternative. And even like back in 2020, I had to only cancel one of my events.
Right.
And was able to, within restrictions, shorter caps, still, host events. So yeah, but I do know, just speaking with other race directors, out on the West Coast and especially mountain events, there's so much that impacts, forest fires. You've got the trail damage. It just makes permitting very difficult. Logging, government shutdowns,
Right.
like it's like everything just impacts hosting a race. Touchwood, haven't had to deal with any of that here. Um, so yeah, so that's where we are. So quickly talk to me about the race cap, because of what Ice Age is, and I know it sells out every year as it's, the 50K is part of the 50K mashup lottery. I remember years where the hosting website was crashing because people were trying to get in, and I still remember setting my alarm, I was like, okay, it's opening at this time and I got to get in. And this was back in 2016. So how do you manage that? And then what do those caps look like? And I know there's also, because it's a history of the race, you guys definitely have room for the old timers. So yeah, touch on that for me.
That's a lot. Yeah, the whole crashing scenario is funny now. It really wasn't very funny for a few years
Oh
there.
yeah, yeah.
Because I was watching the meltdown, live, and was sending emails to runners until 2 in the morning,
Right.
because I wanted to respond to every single person
Sure.
who had an issue or who wasn't able to get into the race. Sometimes despite hours of trying. And it's exacerbated when it's Packer Sunday, because people want to watch the Green Bay Packers,
Right.
and they're stuck trying to register for this stupid race. I'm sure they were thinking. So, um, but yeah, I think that's when I realized that Ice Age was kind of a thing. When
Yeah.
the first crash, how terrible is that? But yeah, it overwhelmed the system, and the we were able to sort of dig out, and everyone who wanted to run the race, who wasn't so angry that they decided they were never going to run the race again, had an opportunity to do it. And the 50, all three races that year, you know, it, accounting for sort of the delays, sold out in less than a half an hour.
Yeah.
And what's happening now is obviously the system has been upgraded, and servers are able to sort of handle sort of this crush of registrations at the opening times for each of the three races. Interestingly, the half marathon is now the race that sells out the fastest.
All right.
50K is nearby.
Yeah.
I've raised the cap on the 50 miler, so that's relieved some of the pressure on that race.
Sure.
Um, and I don't think we keep a wait list when we reach capacity. I think, except for the half marathon, that everyone who contacts me and wants to be added to the wait list has been offered an opportunity to run. I
Sure.
really do want to get as many people into the race for the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a volunteer race director, and you know, I think it's a great race and event, and certainly for first time runners, I firmly believe it is a great introduction to the sport. And as I said, I think in the bio that I shared with you, I mean, one of the greatest compliments I heard was last year from a runner who after the race, there are hundreds, if the weather cooperates, there are hundreds of folks just sitting around on blankets and talking. We have
Yeah.
free beer, we have live music, and they were just surveying all of the runners, just enjoying their time. And he said, when people talk about the ultra running community, this is what they're talking about.
Yeah. No,
And
absolutely. I'd agree. Yeah.
that
It's
was
just, yeah.
great.
Ice Age definitely has a completely, it's very old school. I mean, and you fit right in. There's no pretenses. It's definitely, I think Wisconsin and that area, a lot of races in that area definitely embody that. So what's the race cap that overall? How many runners are you hosting annually, would you say?
Uh, I'm in the process of setting it for 2026. I think the cap for the 50 miler will be 500, although we
Okay.
we might bump it up to 525 or 550. It's 325 for the 50K and 325 for the half marathon. Again, I think we're somewhat constricted by parking.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, I think, not so much the 50 miler, but the 50K and the half marathon could grow, but we can't allow it to.
Sure. So, with that cap and the amount of people you're hosting and just my experience with the race, the volunteer crew, because I mean it's a extremely well supported event. So just touch on what that volunteer, coordinating all that looks like, and then also trail work. Are you guys have because May is sort of, early spring, so is that a lot of work involved, especially Nordic, going out that 9 mile loop? Um, what does, that look like for trail maintenance for you?
Yeah. Um, I say it every year and I mean it. This race doesn't happen because of me. It happens because of the captains who are involved in their specific sort of responsibilities. We have 16 captains that are part of the Ice Age organization. They range from course maintenance and marking, the volunteer coordinator, uh,
Yeah,
Angela Barbera. I have to call her out by name because she's a remarkable coordinator who enlists and supports and gives directions to 270 volunteers
holy crap,
before
yeah,
race day. So
sure,
she's getting a lot of questions, and I'm standing next to a rock on a trail. Am I near the aid station kind of thing?
yeah,
So. We have a historian. We have the aid station captains. Ice Age has 10 aid stations, which may be excessive,
sure,
but it's really sort of a remnant of the early race
yeah,
when there were no hydration packs,
yeah,
and everyone ran usually without any support on their person, maybe a water bottle. And there are certainly some aid stations we could remove from the course, but we
yeah,
don't, because the people who are the captains there and the volunteers who are part of it enjoy it so much.
sure,
And the runners, I think that's part of the reason it makes it a really attractive first 50 miler, is that there's not a great distance between aid stations, even though sometimes it probably feels that way.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So, yeah, so those 16 captains, we have two organizational meetings prior to the race. They are uh, each individual remarkable in not only they're smart, they work hard, and they come with ideas.
yeah,
And so, our first meeting is like what went right, what went wrong last year. Everybody sort of offers their ideas. We make adjustments. And then the second meeting, which happens about 3 weeks before the race, is a time when we sort of dig into sort of the logistics and make sure that the aid station food is ordered and in the right quantities and delivered, and that we have water supplies, the course markings are set. The course marking team usually involves like 3 or 4 people who go
yeah.
out, before the race and mark it. We also, I think we might be one of the only races that has a beer captain, who is solely responsible for making sure there is beer at the
Yeah,
end of the race. Um, John Cornell is a wonderful guy and has negotiated a pretty great arrangement with Central Waters Brewing, which is a microbrewery based in central Wisconsin. I say that because, as a race director, it's sometimes difficult to find people to sponsor your race.
yeah,
Um, and they contacted us and offered to provide all the beer for the runners.
sure,
And I said, why do you want to do this? I mean, that's quite a commitment. Not
right,
only provide a whole bunch of beer, but he has got to drive it down
yeah,
from central Wisconsin. And he said, well, because I run Ice Age. And
yeah,
I said,
yeah,
well, okay. So he's I think a 7-year finisher. So
very nice.
so it's great to have that kind of partnership. But it's truly the captains and the volunteers that show up on race day that make this the event that it is.
Okay. Well, thank you for chatting with me. I appreciate it. And before I let you go, I have so I know Western St back, I can't remember the year Western States took out 50 milers as qualifiers. I don't know if you have a memory of that because I know. So, two questions for you. One, do you think that has impacted at all the registration numbers for Ice Age? Um, and the second question for you would be, have you ever considered going lottery for Ice Age? Because I know that's kind of the route a lot of events that are crashing registrations or are booming and blowing up are going.
Yeah,
Where are you guys at, or
those are
where's your
good
stance on
questions.
that?
It's I don't know the extent that uh, the Western states' effect on Ice Age. I mean, Ice Age was sets up pretty well as a trainer, as you know, for
Yeah, yeah,
Western
yeah, yeah.
states. Um, I believe that the ult I believe they stopped accepting 50-mile qualifiers. And I'm not sure exactly, but I think it was around 2015 or 2016.
Sure. That
Um,
sounds about right. Yeah.
yeah, I know we did have a fair number of runners who would come to Wisconsin each year just for that qualifier, but I don't, it's hard to sort of quantify. I'm not quite sure what that impact was. And what was your second question? Apologies.
Lottery. Have you considered,
Oh,
has there been talk about, possibly Ice Age becoming a lottery instead of just keeping the traditional registration and, pre-invite, pre-registration invites?
um, not seriously, but that is certainly worth considering. I mean, what we've been trying to do is to um, is to introduce sort of a stepped registration process to take some of the pressure off of noon on the second Sunday in December, which is when the 50-miler opens. So, um, you know, we offer folks who have finished any combination of races more than 10 times the
Yeah.
opportunity to register before that date. Winners in age divisions and overall winners. Volunteers can register early. Race directors for other ultras can also register early. We have a bunch of criteria that we're using now to sort of offer folks who have a particular connection with the race the opportunity to register before the general scrum on registration day. That does, I think that's helped. I mean,
Yeah.
we generally get about 150 to 200 runners that register before general registration. Um,
Gotcha.
so that's kind of that's shelved the lottery
Okay.
discussion for a little while.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate you sitting down with me and sharing a lot of the history. And I'd love to be back at Ice Age. Um,
Come back. As a race director, you can register early.
yes, it's been a while. I would love to come back. And I know so many people in the area and the community. It's definitely a wonderful community of runners. So
Well, we'd love to have you back. Honestly, it'd
I
be good to see
appreciate it.
you.
All right. Well, thanks to everyone for tuning in to today's episode. For more information about the TURD podcast, visit our website at terraintrailrunners.com. That's runners with an S, or give us a follow on the social media channels. Until next time, don't forget to thank the folks behind the scenes that make the races happen. As race directors, we thrive on that love. Thank you.